Good day from the Johnson Space Center in Houston. You're looking live inside the International Space Station Flight Control Room, where at this hour the Orbit 1 team of flight controllers is on console, awaiting the arrival of a white stork at the International Outpost. In Japanese, the word for white stork is kanatori, and that is the affectionate name provided to the HTV cargo ship, the HTV-4, by the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency. This big cargo ship that is about 16.5 tons in mass is now sitting just 250 meters or 820 feet away from the International Space Station in the final phase of what so far has been a flawless approach to the orbital laboratory, with the grapple and capture of that cargo ship expected about an hour and a half from now at 6:29 a.m. Central Time. On console at this hour here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room, the Orbit 1 lead flight director and the lead for HTV operations is Flight Director Ed Van Cise on the right side of your picture, joined on console this morning by veteran astronaut Mike Fink, who is serving as the communications link between Mission Control and the crew on board the International Space Station. Van Cise just moments ago conducted a poll of his team of flight controllers to receive a go for the initiation of the approach of the HTV inside 250 meters. The HTV cargo ship arrived on what is known as the R-bar. That is the radial vector, the imaginary line drawn between the International Space Station and the center of the Earth. The approach of the HTV for its final rendezvous and grapple by the crew on board the space station occurring as it moves very slowly and glacially from a point below the International Space Station to a grapple point just about 30 feet away from the complex. We'll talk about the grapple operations in a minute. This team of flight controllers is working in concert with a team of Japanese flight controllers around the globe at the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency's SIPSI Center, their flight control center in Tsukuba, Japan. They are working in tandem with the flight control team here in Houston to make sure that all of the HTV systems are in excellent shape. This rendezvous since the launch of the HTV back on Saturday has been picture perfect, with no significant issues having been worked by the flight control team to reach this point. The journey of this fourth in the series of Japanese cargo ships began last Saturday afternoon U.S. time, early Sunday morning Japan time, with the liftoff of the H-2B rocket from the Tanegashima Space Center in southern Japan. The engines lit up on the H-2B rocket, liftoff occurring at 2:48 and 46 seconds p.m. Central Time, which was 4:48 and 46 seconds a.m. Japan time, just about 30 minutes before sunrise off the Japanese coast. The H-2B rocket climbed majestically away from its launch pad and 15 minutes later deposited the HTV-4 into its preliminary orbit and the start of a 5.5 chase to catch up to the International Space Station. Over the last 5.5 days, a series of rendezvous maneuvers by the HTV as it uses a series of 4 main thrusters and 28 reaction control system jets has been by the book, no issues reported, all of this pre-programmed into the HTV's onboard computers. The HTV is bringing to the International Space Station some 3.6 tons of cargo, both pressurized inside the HTV spacecraft itself in the form of some 4,094 pounds of dry cargo, spare parts, experiment hardware, some 1,257 pounds of water in 24 contingency water bags, and on the outside of the HTV itself, on what is called the exposed pallet that is housed inside a slot on the side of the body of the HTV-4, are a series of critical spare parts and an experiment platform for the Defense Department, a main bus switching unit, and a utility transfer assembly for the Solar Alpha rotary joint on the International Space Station. Once the HTV-4 is grappled and berthed onto the Earth-facing port of the Harmony module later this morning, the crew will have an opportunity to open the hatch to the HTV on Saturday and begin to unload its pressurized cargo. It then will set the stage for a series of elegant robotic ballet that will be conducted by ground controllers here in Houston and the flight control team in Scuba, in which that exposed pallet will be extracted from the side of the HTV by the Canadian-built space station robotic manipulator system, the Canadarm2. It then will be maneuvered to a handoff position by ground controllers here in Houston to the team in Scuba that will be operating the Japanese Experiment Module Remote Manipulator System, or GEM-RMS, for a handoff of that exposed pallet, and ultimately for its installation on the front porch of the Kibo module called the Exposed Facility, where over the course of the next weeks, the spare parts and experiments will be lifted out of that exposed pallet and placed on various locations along the truss of the International Space Station.
Houston Station in Block 5, the hold command is armed.
Copy, stand by. And Chris, we see the hold arm down here, so you are go for step 6 in 1.102 for the HCP disarm.
Hey, that's in work.
Mike Fink, the spacecraft communicator, talking to flight engineer Chris Cassidy on board the International Space Station. Cassidy, at the moment, is inside the cupola of the orbital outpost, along with flight engineer Karen Nyberg. Nyberg is the Canadarm2 robotic arm operator for today's Grapple of the HTV-4. Just a few minutes ago,
the hold command is disarmed.
Copy, Chris. We can see that the HCP command checkout is confirmed to be successful. Perform step number 7 in 1.102.
This dialogue is a series of checkpoints between the 250-meter point and the 30-meter hold point for the HTV. The 30-meter hold point is a final opportunity for the teams here in Houston and in Scuba, Japan, to check out the systems of the HTV cargo ship before it initiates its final approach to a point just 30 feet away from the space station's robotic arm and its grapple point for Karen Nyberg. Again, the choreography, as you look at a view of the HTV cargo ship as it sails some 260 miles over Southeast Asia, moving from southwest to northeast in an orbit inclined 51.6 degrees to either side of the equator. Nyberg and Cassidy side by side in the station's cupola. They are joined by Luca Parmitano, who is monitoring HTV systems on a control panel that was set up and checked out in concert with the flight control team in Scuba the other day.
Strobe tracker circle is those same measurements, half aft, half width, half length aft, and half width starboard of the center of the crew abort corridor limits.
Copy, Chris. Thanks for the report. And at this point, we're satisfied with those offsets. And Chris, just for your information, we're expecting those offsets to converge as we get closer.
Okay, copy that.
The view that you just saw was from a monitor that is set up in the cupola of the International Space Station, a reference point for both Nyberg and Cassidy to use as the HTV enters what is known as the capture envelope. This is basically a graphical portrayal based on the global positioning system data provided from the HTV and its computers to the flight control teams here in Houston and in Tsukuba, Japan, so that the crew can essentially have a situational awareness and a view of the HTV as they begin to move the station's robotic arm at the point at which the HTV will be just 30 feet away from a high hover position down toward the grapple fixture on the HTV that is now in view of the crew itself, the HTV having conducted a yaw maneuver at a distance of 250 meters to appropriately display and present the grapple fixture toward the station's Canadarm2 robotic arm. This view is a computer-generated graphical portrayal from the visiting vehicle officer's console here in Mission Control. It shows the cone of approach of the HTV over the course of this final 250-meter transit from one of its final hold points or checkpoints to the point at which you see the International Space Station, the HTV flying directly below the station as the two spacecraft, the station itself and the cargo craft, fly over Taiwan at the moment at an altitude of 260 miles. The grapple and installation of the HTV onto the nadir or Earth-facing port of the Harmony module will be a collaboration of the crew and the flight control team here in Houston. Karen Nyberg, again, as we mentioned, will be at the controls of the station's robotic arm to reach out and grapple the grapple fixture on the HTV at the appropriate point. Grapple expected about an hour and 16 minutes from now at 6:29 a.m. Central Time. Once the HTV is actually grappled by Nyberg, then she turns over the control of the operation to the robotics console here in Mission Control, and the robotics officer, John Bellingham, will actually be maneuvering the station's robotic arm for first an inspection of the passive common berthing mechanism on the top of the HTV, then to the pre-install and ready-to-latch position in the envelope of the common berthing mechanism on the nadir or Earth-facing side of Harmony. Once the ready-to-latch indications are provided to the crew, the robotic arm will be placed in a limp position or configuration with its brakes off so that no inadvertent movement of the arm would disrupt the fine alignment between the two docking mechanisms, if you will, on the top of the HTV and on the bottom of Harmony. Once it is in the ready-to-latch position, the crew will begin to send commands to begin the first stage of bolting of the HTV to the nadir port of Harmony. The ground then takes back over with the final bolting, and once we reach what is called second stage capture, that will be the formal bolting and formal installation of the HTV as part of the International Space Station for the next month. The HTV is expected once again to have its hatch opened on Saturday and to have its internal cargo start to be unloaded on Saturday afternoon with Sunday night earmarked for the start of robotic operations to remove the exposed pallet from the side of the HTV to be installed on the front porch of the Japanese Kibo module. It ultimately will be loaded with trash and items no longer needed on board the International Space Station and will be discarded with an unberthing and release on September 4th. it will move to a safe position away from the International Space Station, and several days later will be deorbited for a fiery demise and a breakup over the Pacific Ocean.
Houston Station on 2 with a Block Bravo update. Again, monitor 1, camera 7. The white strobe is converging from the last report, and it is definitely within the crew abort quarter limits. The vehicle size matches the outline, and the white strobe position, like I said, is converging, but maybe a third of a length aft of the strobe tracker circle. And the strobe tracker circle is centered up port starboard in just maybe half of a vehicle length aft. And again, per your earlier thoughts and my observations, it looks like it's converging from the previous report.
And Chris, thanks for the report. We copied all, and we like to hear about convergence, so good report.
As we mentioned earlier, the HTV has been flying virtually trouble-free with no significant systems issues since its launch 5.5 days ago from the Tanegashima Space Center in southern Japan. The HTV overnight conducted critical rendezvous maneuvers to fine-tune its path to the International Space Station. About an hour and 20 minutes ago, Chris Cassidy radioed down to Capcom Mike Fink here in Mission Control that he had his first visual tally-ho on the HTV. That was at a distance of several hundred meters away. And then just a few minutes later, Cassidy reported a rather interesting sight as the International Space Station flew over the southwestern United States.
Station on 2. HTV is just inside of 500 meters from us, and we are about 200 miles above and 100 miles to the west of Houston, and we have both HTV and Houston in sight. Good morning.
Good morning. Copy. You guys look great.
It's a beautiful sight right now with HTV directly in the city lights of Houston, Dallas, or Houston and Dallas, between the two cities.
That exchange between Chris Cassidy on board the station and Mike Fink here in Mission Control occurring just about 4:10 a.m. Central Time as the two vehicles flew some 260 statute miles over Texas. At the moment, the two vehicles now separated by some 100 meters or so, flying from southwest to northeast, about to pass just to the south of Seoul, South Korea. The visiting vehicle officer here in Mission Control reports that all of the systems are in excellent shape for the HTV-4 as it begins to close in on the 30-meter hold point, or a distance of about 98 feet away from the International Space Station. The space station's Canadarm2 was maneuvered a couple of days ago into what is called a high hover position, putting it in the correct orientation for flight engineer Karen Nyberg to use to reach out and grapple the HTV once it reaches a distance of just 30 feet from the orbital outpost. The final approach of the HTV-4 from its 30-meter hold point to what is called the capture point. The HTV will be approaching at a maximum rate of about 1 inch per second. It will take about 21 minutes to move from the 30-meter hold point to the capture point. That again will be monitored very carefully by Chris Cassidy, while Luca Parmitano of the European Space Agency keeps a watchful eye on the HTV's systems inside what is called the inner capture volume. If you take a look at this graph graphical portrayal from the visiting vehicle officer's console, a computer-generated portrayal. You see at the top of this dotted line, that's the HTV-4 right down the pike as it moves in the center of the approach cone. The inner capture volume is monitored on a computer screen inside the cupola by the crew to make sure that the HTV is properly aligned for the ultimate grapple by Nyberg using the station's Canadarm2. And there you see a model of the HTV here in Mission Control, just over the left shoulder of Flight Director Ed Van Cise. That model resides on the console of the visiting vehicle officer. Mark Anderson is keeping a watchful eye himself. He is the VVO, or the visiting vehicle officer, for today's rendezvous and grapple of the HTV, at which point his job is complete for the day. While we await the grapple and installation of the Japanese cargo ship to the International Space Station, other work is ongoing on board the orbital laboratory at this hour. Most notably, Russian cosmonauts Fyodor Yurchikhin and Alexander Mazurkin are inside the Russian segment of the International Space Station as they brush up on procedures and timelines that will be used a week from today when they don Russian Orlan spacesuits and step outside the Piers docking compartment for what is planned to be about a 6.5-hour spacewalk to continue hooking up cables associated with the future arrival of a Russian laboratory module at the International Space Station and the installation of a panel of experiments on the Russian Poisk module. The visiting vehicle officer here in Mission Control reports a good GPS data being received from the HTV as it continues its inexorable crawl up to a grapple point just 30 feet away from the International Space Station. The HTV is scheduled to arrive at the 30-meter or 98-foot hold point about 10 minutes from now. It will remain at that position for about 20 minutes to provide flight controllers here in Houston and at the Japanese Flight Control Center in Tsukuba, Japan, to monitor all of its systems and make sure we have a good alignment between the HTV's passive common berthing mechanism and the grapple fixture on the HTV-4 itself with the space station's remote manipulator system, the Canadarm2, that will be operated by flight engineer Karen Nyberg for the capture of the HTV-4 cargo ship. Once again, more than 3.5 tons of cargo being hauled to the station on the latest in the series of Japanese cargo ships that launched 5.5 days ago from the Tanegashima Space Center in southern Japan, soon to complete its journey to the International Space Station.
Houston Station, a 2 Block Bravo update. Strobe tracker remains in the crew abort quarter center. The vehicle size matches the outline. The strobe itself is circle, and the strobe tracker circle is just slightly aft and just slightly starboard of the crosshairs of the corridor limits.
And we copy all, Chris. Thanks for the report, and it sounds like things are converging nicely.
Okay, good practice. That was my best report yet, and they missed it.
Camera was perfect.
Hey, Chris, I'm not sure my last got up to you. I talked through a blockage like that.
Houston Station, Space to Ground 3. Becky, I didn't quite catch what you said on Space to Ground 2. Looks like we're in and out on Space to Ground 2.
Yeah, sorry, Chris, I talked right through some blockage. Real quick, we appreciate your report. Sounds like good convergence.
Houston Station on 2. Mike, I'll talk to you when we get solid up, but everything looks good with the Black Bravo. I'll give you a more detailed report when we're solid again.
Copy, good convergence.
The sliver of downlink television that we just acquired a moment ago showed the HTV-4 steadily approaching for its grapple by Karen Nyberg at the International Space Station, now just 61 meters away and about 30 meters away from a final hold point of about 20 minutes in duration. The capture time of 6:29 a.m. Central Time is precisely designed to ensure that the crew will have acceptable lighting while attempting to capture the spacecraft, which is about 16.5 tons in mass. This primarily means the selection of this time was provided to avoid any time frame when the sun could enter the field of view of the cameras on board the station, providing the graphical views for the crew inside the cupola, which could cause any blooming or glare. The current capture time of 6:29 a.m. Central is about 34 minutes after sunrise, about 34 minutes before sunset, basically at orbital noon, as the International Space Station is midway between an orbital sunrise and an orbital sunset. This is Mission Control Houston, the flight control team here, keeping a watchful eye on systems. both the International Space Station and working with their counterparts in Scuba, Japan, to ensure that the HTV-4 systems are all in acceptable condition for the final phase of this 5.5-day rendezvous since the cargo craft was launched from the Tanegashima Space Center in southern Japan. The HTV is currently about 40 meters away from the station and about 10 meters away from its final hold point. Once again, and there we are back with some live downlink television of the HTV. You can see a strobe light on the body of the vehicle. It, unlike other cargo ships, does not have deployable solar arrays. The solar panels are wrapped around the body of the HTV itself to provide electrical power for all of its systems. Being discussed here in the flight control team is the exact disposition of the length of the final hold point at 30 meters or just 98 feet away from the station.
Good. Space to Ground 3 here for a second. If you let me know if that's okay to give you a final Block Bravo report.
Yeah, we're listening on 3. Looks like 2 is jumping in too, but we can hear you ready for the report.
Yeah, I think this might be the final Block Bravo, but everything, or at least in step 7, everything looks great. The white strobe is centered up in the crew abort corridor. The vehicle size matches the outline. The strobe position is essentially in the strobe tracker circle, and the strobe tracker circle is more or less right on the crosshairs.
We copy.
That report from Chris Cassidy meshing with the video you just saw a moment ago from the HTV control panel, basically a graphical overlay display that the crew has access to that you're looking at the moment. In the crosshairs of that so-called inner capture volume, the circle represents the HTV itself and represents the fine and precise alignment of the spacecraft as it moves inside the capture envelope up the radial vector from directly below the International Space Station to an ultimate grapple point just 30 feet away from the station to enable robot arm operator Karen Nyberg working from the robotic workstation in the cupola to reach out and grapple the HTV. The capture time is less than an hour away at 6:29 a.m. Central Time. If the crew is ready and everybody at Scuba is happy with the condition of HTV systems, that grapple time could be accelerated by a few minutes. We'll stand by and wait and see how efficient the final phase of the rendezvous unfolds. The HTV now has put the brakes on at a distance of 30 meters or 98 feet away from the International Space Station. Clocks up on the wall here in Mission Control reflecting a no earlier than departure time of 30 meters, from 30 meters, of about 15 minutes from now. Before that occurs, the flight control team here in Houston, under the direction of Flight Director Ed Van Cise, will provide a go, no-go poll of the team of flight controllers, as will the flight control team in Scuba, Japan, before the HTV begins its final approach for capture.
Houston station for Block 8. We can confirm the VV mode and sub mode, and nav range is within the limits at 28.4. The strobe light is not going to be an issue. It's no problem.
Okay, we copy for Block 8, and Chris, yeah, if you don't mind, we'd like to ask you for the blocks when we're ready, because we have a billion things down here to do on two sides of the ocean. Hope you understand.
Absolutely, it's no problem. So, Block Bravo.
Moscow Station on Space to Ground 1. Go ahead.
Mike, I think I was confused. Did you say you want another Block Bravo update?
No.
Question on
Yeah,
HTV activity.
And all future blocks, we'll let you know when we need those blocks. We have a script down here that we got to kind of follow.
Okay, copy all, no problem.
This is Mission Control Houston. Visiting vehicle officer reports that the flight control team in Scuba is happy with the condition of HTV-4. It is well within the capture envelope, right down the center line of the approach corridor.
And Chris, on Space to Ground 2, just to let you know, we have a 30-meter hold confirmed down here. We got your first part of step number 8 in 1.102, and you are clear to go on to do the second half of step 8 there, which is setting up for approach monitoring and capture.
Okay, we're going to step 3 of procedure 1.110.
That's where we expect you.
With everything in good shape, the HTV and the International Space Station flying in tandem, less than 100 feet apart from one another, flying from northwest to southeast, about 260 statute miles above the Earth, soon to skirt just to the west of California and Baja California on this particular orbit of the Earth. This is Mission Control Houston. We are expecting the flight control team here in Houston to be polled by Flight Director Ed Van Cise shortly for a final go-no-go for the departure from 30 meters. The HTV-4 or Kanatori-4, the Japanese word for white stork, the cargo craft that has automatically made its way over the past 5.5 days from the launch pad at Tanegashima, Japan, to this point, approaching its capture point at the International Space Station, just 30 meters away, some 98 feet away from being grappled by flight engineer Karen Nyberg, who is at the controls of the Canadarm2 robotic arm from a robotics workstation in the cupola. We're about 13 minutes away from entering an orbital sunrise, and once again the capture time, the desired capture time of 6:29 a.m. Central Time, is pegged to the midway point between orbital sunrise and orbital sunset, and is designed to minimize any glare or blooming that the sun may be forcing off of the shiny surface of the HTV that is covered with its solar panels for electrical production. The orbital capture time is pegged to orbital noon, the midway point between an orbital sunrise and sunset, although it is not a sacrosanct time. It depends on the cruise comfort factor in the cupola and the status of HTV systems as it slowly approaches to a point just 30 feet away from the capture point and the station's robotic arm that will be manipulated into the right grapple position by Karen Nyberg. For Chris Cassidy, who is assisting Nyberg in today's grapple operation, he, Station Commander Pavel Vinogradov, and Flight Engineer Alexander Mazurkin are in their 134th day in space since their launch from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan in their Soyuz TMA-08M spacecraft back on March 29th. 2 months later, they were joined by Flight Engineer Karen Nyberg, along with Fyodor Yurchikhin and Luca Parmitano of the European Space Agency, who rode their Soyuz TMA-09M spacecraft from Baikonur to the International Space Station. They are in their 73rd day in space. Flight Director Ed Van Cise now beginning his final poll of his team of flight controllers to get a go for departure from 30 meters for the HTV-4. All positions here in Mission Control are go for final approach. That will be relayed up to the crew momentarily. Ed Van Cise, who's the lead HTV-4 flight director, is joined on console on the far right hand side of your screen by Flight Director Judd Freeling, who will take over from Van Cise after the grapple and capture of the HTV. He will preside over the robotic installation of the cargo craft onto the Earth-facing port of the Harmony module as the Orbit 2 team of flight controllers moves into the flight control room. And once again, this computer-generated graphical portrayal from the visiting vehicle officer's console shows the HTV-4 cargo craft right down the middle of the capture envelope, or the inner capture volume as it is called. This is the same view that is being seen on monitors aboard the International Space Station. You can see the HTV-4 will move within that cone directly to a point some 30 feet away from the Grapple, the latching end effector on the end of the station's robotic arm for a Grapple by flight engineer Karen Nyberg. Capture expected around 6:29 a.m. Central Time.
Houston Station, Space to Ground 2. We've completed step 3. The crew capture briefing and our review is complete. We're go for HTV approach to the capture point.
And Chris, we copy. It's going to be about 2 more minutes before we depart the 30 meters.
Copy that.
The flight control team in Scuba reporting to Flight Director Ed Van Cise here in Mission Control that they are go for final capture as well. We expect the HTV to resume its final approach on commanding from the flight control team in Scuba about a minute from now.
Station Houston on 2. Both SIPSI and Houston are ready for HTV approach from 30 meters. You can expect to see departure shortly, and we'll call for you to give us step 9 when we're ready.
Okay, Houston, we copy all.
Flying 260 statute miles over the Pacific Ocean to the southwest of Mexico City, the HTV-4 cargo ship about to resume its final approach for Grapple from inside 30 meters.
All right, station Houston, back with you. And HTV has begun approach from 30 meters. Please perform step number 9 in 1.102. You are primed to issue retreat if the nav range goes below 6 meters. Also, if you could give us camera 3 to the settings in the robotics procedure 1.110 for the monitor 3, camera 3 settings, we'd appreciate it.
Copy all, we're in block 9 and the camera actions are in work.
Thank you very much, we can see that.
This is Mission Control Houston. The HTV-4 cargo craft loaded with more than 3.5 tons of supplies, spare parts, and experiment hardware for the Expedition 36 crew on board the orbital outpost is slowly making its way inside 30 meters to a capture point that will be just 30 feet away from the station's robotic arm, which soon will be under the control of flight engineer Karen Nyberg from a robotics workstation she and Chris Cassidy are working from in the cupola of the International Space Station.
Still be commanding the cameras, but they're fixed to a pan of 70 and 65 now. And if you're ready, here comes a Block Bravo.
Thanks for the camera help, and we're ready for Block Bravo.
Everything looks wonderful. The strobe is very much within the crew abort quarter limits. The vehicle size matches the outline. The position of the strobe is on the starboard edge of the strobe tracker circle, but it's essentially there. And the strobe tracker circle itself is just slightly starboard and just slightly aft of the center crosshairs of the abort quarter limits.
We copy the Block Bravo, and it sounds like we got good alignment. And just from here on out, you guys, the cameras are all yours.
Okay, we appreciate those words. We are primed for cameras, and we'll consider Block 9 complete unless you'd like an additional Block Bravo as we get closer to the stopping point.
And Chris, where's your Block Bravos, or we won't need any more from this point on?
Okay, copy all, I concur. And next action's in Block 10.
Right, and we'll call you for Block 10 when we're ready for it.
Moving into an orbital sunrise, the International Space Station and the HTV-4 cargo craft now slowly being illuminated. 25 meters now separating the two spacecraft. 21 meters separating the HTV-4 from its capture point. The International Space Station and the Japanese cargo ship flying to the west of Lima, Peru. With its 28 reaction control system jets behaving normally, the HTV-4 approaches at a rate of just 1 inch per second, now inside 20 meters away, with capture still expected around 6:29 a.m. Central Time, although that could be accelerated if everyone is happy once the cargo craft reaches its capture point some 14 minutes from now. The Japanese cargo ship will spend a month at the International Space Station once it is installed, as the crew works to unstow the internal cargo, the pressurized cargo that is housed in racks inside the spacecraft itself, and the robotics work that will take place beginning late Sunday to remove the exposed pallet from a slot on the side of the HTV that currently houses a pair of critical spare replacement units, a main bus switching unit, and a utility transfer assembly unit for the solar alpha rotary joint for future use on the station, as well as a pallet of materials experiments for the Defense Department, all of that hardware to be mounted in the weeks ahead on various points on the truss of the International Space Station. "15 meters now separating HTV and the International Space Station. The two craft approaching the west coast of South America, and will soon be flying from northwest to southeast just north of Santiago, the capital of Chile. The visiting vehicle officer reports that HTV is inside 15 meters, continuing to close at a normal rate. Outstanding view, sunrise over the limb of the Earth as the HTV puts itself into a point very shortly for its final grapple by flight engineer Karen Nyberg operating the Canadarm2 from the cupola of the International Space Station. This view now from a camera on the latching end effector at the end of the station's Canadarm2. Briefly lost our downlink television capability from the International Space Station. We'll reacquire that capability shortly for a sliver of time. Meanwhile, you're looking once again at the graphical portrayal based on real-time computer-generated data from the visiting vehicle officer's console of the HTV-4 right in the heart of the capture envelope, the inner capture volume, as it approaches its capture point of just 30 feet away from the station. And this view, also based on computer-generated data from the robotics console, the robo position here in mission control, showing the separation distance between the grapple fixture on the side of HTV-4 and the latching end effector at the end of Canadarm2. An American-European trio monitoring HTV systems, soon to grapple the Japanese cargo ship with a Canadian-built robot arm, reflective of the multinational flavor of the International Space Station. Flying directly over the heart of Argentina, you can see the HTV rising into view of the latching end effector's camera. You'll soon be looking right down the heart of the grapple fixture on the side of HTV-4 that Karen Nyberg will latch onto a short time from now. Now less than 11 meters away, closing at its normal rate of about 1 inch per second. A good view of HTV-4. No deployable solar panels on this cargo craft, unlike its companion craft. The solar panels basically wrapped around the body of HTV to provide electrical power for the spacecraft. Outstanding views of the orbital choreography being performed as the International Space Station and HTV-4 are just 10 meters apart. The two craft currently flying 260 miles over the South Atlantic. We've updated the capture clock to reflect a predicted grapple time of about 6:26 a.m. Central Time, just a few minutes ahead of the predicted grapple time. Nothing magic about that time, with as long as the lighting remains good for the crew on board the International Space Station. Just about 8 meters separating HTV from the International Space Station. The final capture sequence will involve the inhibiting of the thrusters on the International Space Station. The space station's robotic arm, under the control of Karen Nyberg, will move in from its current high hover position. The HTV itself will be commanded to what is called free drift. All of its thrusters will be disabled to avoid any inadvertent thruster firings during the time of grapple itself. And then at that point, it's simply a process of Nyberg moving in with the arm for latching on and a final capture of the spacecraft.
The capture point hold confirmation.
Copy, Houston, step 10. The VV mode, sub mode are as per the cue card. The range, nav range is 9.2, and the range rate is 0. The grapple fixture is stable and within the capture volume on both monitors. With that, we show the capture point hold is confirmed.
We copy and we see the same thing here, and it looks like you guys agree that the grapple fixture is within the capture volume on both camera views.
That's affirmative. In both camera views, the grapple fixture is stable and within the grapple volume.
Fantastic. Block 10 is complete.
So at this point, HTV-4 has reached its capture point just 30 feet away from the International Space Station. A final series of systems checks to be performed. You heard Chris Cassidy indicate from the cupola that everything looks great for the crew on board. The final go, no-go for capture to be provided in one last poll by Flight Director Ed Van Cise here in Mission Control before Karen Nyberg begins to move the remote manipulator system in for the capture of the cargo ship.
You see that the FRGF SEP lights are lit. The hold lights are not lit. So the HCP LED status matches as expected in Block 11, and we're happy with the lighting conditions. As far as we're concerned on board, the capture prep is confirmed, and we are ready for HTV capture.
And Chris, we weren't quite ready for Block 11 yet, so we'll stand by, and we might have to ask you to do that again. Sorry. Okay, Expedition 36 crew, we copy. It looks like we got what we needed from your early Block 11. So please stand by for a go to perform capture. Please stand by.
Absolutely, we're standing by.
Flight Director Ed Van Cise now polling his team of flight controllers to get a final go, no-go for capture. Everything looking great on board the International Space Station and on the HTV itself. And HTV flight controllers and scuba are also go for capture.
Station Houston, the moment we've been waiting for. You are go for the HTV capture sequence, which is step 4 in the robotics procedure 1.110, and begin monitoring the back-away cue card. And since we're a few minutes early, please make sure and observe the no exercise constraint.
Okay, that's great news, and we understand that we are go for capture. We're transitioning to step 4 of the robotic procedure 1.110, and the back-away cue card's in hand, and understand that it's in effect from now until we transition over the pin.
That is correct, and confirmed. Definitely you have a go for capture sequence. Good luck.
Thanks very much. It's a beautiful sight here.
With that, Chris Cassidy monitoring all of the systems and providing the communications with Capcom Mike Fink here in Mission Control. Center stage now goes to Karen Nyberg at the cupola at the robotics workstation, as she will now begin to slowly move the Canadarm2 in for a grapple of HTV-4 to complete its 5.5 day journey from the launch pad in Tanegashima, Japan. The journey of HTV-4 beginning with its launch last Saturday afternoon U.S. time in the pre-dawn hours of Sunday at Tanegashima. This is Mission Control Houston. As we enter the final minutes before the grapple of HTV-4, it's worth noting that we are expected to lose our downlink television capability. Murphy at work here, Murphy's Law in work. We'll be losing a downlink TV capability from the station just about 2.5 minutes from now. So we may not actually see the actual capture, but we certainly will be reporting it as it happens. The HTV-4 has now been placed in free drift on command from Japanese flight controllers in Tsukuba, disabling all of its thrusters and avoiding any inadvertent thruster firings that could disrupt the grapple procedures.
Houston Station, we're starting the approach.
Copy.
The robotics officer here in Mission Control reports the arm in motion. And having lost our downlink TV capability, we now switch to the graphically portrayed computer-generated image from both the robotics console and the visiting vehicle officer's console. The International Space Station now in free drift. 1 meter away from capture. Latching end effector over the pin. Capture confirmed at 6:22 a.m. Central Time. Grapple confirmed. The International Space Station and HTV-4 flying 260 miles south of South Africa.
Houston Station capture is complete. Would like to say congratulations to the entire JAXA team and everybody else around the world who has successfully gotten the fourth HTV to the International Space Station.
And Karen and the rest of the Expedition 36 crew, congratulations. And Scuba sends her thanks and congratulations. Down here we show a successful grapple and capture of the Kunotori cargo vehicle. Good work. Kunotori wa Nihon no Gijutsu no Kessho desu. Nihon no minasan omedetou gozaimasu.
Karen Nyberg offering congratulations to the two flight control teams in Houston and Scuba Japan on the successful grapple of the HTV-4 at 6:22 a.m. Central Time as the International Space Station and the Japanese cargo craft flew to the south of South Africa. Mike Fink, the CAPCOM or spacecraft communicator here in Mission Control, radioing back to the crew on board the International Space Station in Japanese. That translation of what he said is Kanotori, which is the Japanese word for white stork, the affectionate name that JAXA provides for its cargo craft. He said Kanotori is the crystallization of Japanese technology. Congratulations to all people and to the people of Japan.
Station Houston on 2 for forward work.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that was great to watch. We lost KU just about right as you started moving the arm in for final capture. So, but up until that point, it was so beautiful to watch. So, good job. We show you guys finished with the robotics procedures, and you're complete with all the capture activities as far as we're concerned. Next time we're going to see you, and it's kind of whenever you're ready, and that's for Chris, the CBCS power-up steps. Also, we'd like to remind you about the exercise constraints.
Copy all. And Houston Station, the items on Chris's timeline, is that something that needs to go on time, or is that something that can be done early?
Okay, for the CBCS, that can go early whenever you guys are ready. I think CBM will probably be a little bit later.
Copy that.
This is Mission Control Houston. Just to recap, the HTV-4 completed a flawless rendezvous of 5.5 days following its launch from the Tanegashima Space Center in southern Japan last Saturday afternoon U.S. time. Its journey to the International Space Station culminating with its capture by astronaut Karen Nyberg using the station's Canadarm2 robotic arm from a workstation in the cupola, as she grappled on to a grapple fixture on the side of the Japanese cargo craft at 6:22 a.m. Central Time, 7:22 Eastern Time, as HTV-4 and the International Space Station flew 260 statute miles to the south of the coast of South Africa. The crew now will begin the process of powering up what is called the Common Berthing Mechanism camera system, which is a set of cameras that will be employed for the fine alignment of the HTV-4's passive common berthing mechanism, essentially a docking mechanism on the end of the HTV-4 cargo craft, to the active common berthing mechanism that is on the Earth-facing port of the Harmony module, to which it will reside for the next month once it is installed and bolted into place. So with that, we'll wrap up our coverage for now. A programming note, we will resume our coverage an hour and a half from now at 8 a.m. Central Time, 9 a.m. Eastern Time with the berthing coverage. The berthing operations scheduled to begin in the neighborhood of 8:30 a.m. Central Time, 9:30 Eastern Time. So we'll be back in about an hour and a half. For now, HTV-4 safely in the grasp of Canadarm2. And for now, we'll wish you a good morning from Mission Control in Houston.